she can go ahead and get started. If he can let me into the Zoom meeting. Should have been a little thing there. Should be enough. No.
Any of that recorded at all?
No. No. Now, as soon as I went into YouTube Live, it started spinning.
So you go back, so.
Yeah, if you could, that'd be great. Sorry, folks, we're having some technical difficulties here. Okay.
So can I start?
Yep, go ahead and get started.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Marcellus Central School District Board of Education meeting for this evening, Monday, April 20th, 2020. This time I'll ask you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, and thank you for joining us virtually for our Board of Education meeting this evening. I don't need to tell you that these are unique, challenging, and uncertain times.
The only certainty, it seems, is uncertainty. Furthermore, teaching and learning, assessing, and feeding our students are not the only aspects of education impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. As the fallout from COVID-19 and related school closures evolve, we continue to examine better ways to engage our public in our Board of Education meetings. This evening, you will have the opportunity to share comments under both resident comment sections of our agenda, just as you do in person. You can do so by typing your comments into the section of YouTube Live labeled Say Something. That feature is located in the lower right corner of your screen. Once we arrive at the resident comments section of the meeting, we will read any comments we receive from our residents. In addition, as our meeting progresses, we will do our best to show participants any of the documents to which we are referring during this evening's board meeting. Please note that they are also available as links in our school board agenda. The agenda can be found on our website under the Board of Education section. At this time, I move to item 3.1 on the agenda, presentations. Mrs. Brandner.
Thanks, everyone. We're just going to run through some budget updates in light of everything that's been happening with COVID-19 and New York State on pause and many other states. It's obviously going to have an impact on the state budget, which in turn will trickle down to school budgets. So you should be seeing this information on your slide, on your screen right now. And so we're going to proceed through here. So first and foremost, you had previously gotten a look at our state aid runs, and this is a piece of that recreated for you with some things pointed out. So if you take a look here, the first thing that happened since COVID-19, and that is that the governor sent out new aid runs to districts so that we could get a sense of what would actually be happening, at least right now, in light of the struggles that the New York State budget is having. And this was on April 1st, typical on-time budget with aid runs, but in a very atypical situation. So first and foremost, the governor shared that our foundation aid level right now will be frozen at the 1920 level. And you all know, because we've talked about this previously, we weren't getting much for an increase in foundation aid to begin with. It was just under $25,000. So that loss isn't terribly impactful in the grand scheme of things. While not a good situation, it's not as horrific as if we had received a large increase in foundation aid. In addition, there was a new line added to the aid runs called a pandemic adjustment. If you think back, especially if you were on the board back in 2008 and going forward, when we were in the recession period, the New York State budget was struggling at that point, and the governor enacted what was called a gap elimination adjustment. And that was just a line where they took a chunk of aid away from schools. This is very similar. Anticipating that state revenue won't be where they thought it would be, they have adjusted every school district a certain amount. So our amount right now is $155,488. In addition, farther down on the aid run, you can see there is an anticipated backfill of this pandemic adjustment using federal funds, and we put in big letters, if we get them. We're anticipating that those funds will come through to backfill, at least initially, but there's some other challenges that we're facing that will still impact us. So that's what the aid run that we received on April 1st looked like. So some other things have happened since March, when we had our last budget discussion. And one of the things was that we thought we were going to need additional slots in a couple of BOCES programs, and we are not going to need all of the slots we anticipated. So that, fortunately, was a reduction for us on the expenditure side. On the revenue side of the budget, we were, with the economy booming the way it was, we were enjoying an uptick in our investment returns. And we had anticipated an interest return on the revenue side of our budget next year for about $160,000. With the current state of the market, we've had to drop that down to 10% because obviously the returns are just not there. In addition, we have students that go to special programming and eventually graduate. And we, at this point, will have a student that's been at a specialized program graduating, and there will be a tuition reduction for that. You'll notice it says in parentheses, local share only. This is a tuition that we receive some aid on. And so we really can't account for the entire tuition, but just the amount that we pay after aid. So I'll give you an example. If the tuition's $140,000 and we're getting 100 of it back in aid, then the part that we can reduce from the expenditure side of the budget is only $40,000, because while we could take the total amount as a reduction on the expenditure side, we'd also have to take a reduction on the revenue side of the aid. And we've also determined there's some staffing reductions that we should be able to realize due to changes in the needs of some of our special needs students. So the next challenge that we're facing, and this is on the revenue side of the budget, is that part of that aid run was the governor sharing with us that he is going to be examining state revenue 4 times, and that clock started ticking on April 1st, the day that we got our new aid run. And the first look back period is basically the month of April. The next one goes from May 1st to June 30th, then July 1 to December 31st, and then January 1 to March 31. So what those look back periods are for, it's for the governor to examine how revenue is coming in the state of New York. And depending on how that's falling based on the projection, he will make further cuts in aid to school districts. So as you can imagine, that first look back period, April 1st to April 30th, seeing as New York State is on pause, I'm guessing that our revenue projections aren't too wonderful. And we're anticipating that there will be additional cuts in aid, at least the first two look backs, if not all of them. So our goal is to minimize disruption using strategy. So some of the strategy that we're looking at this point, and this is based on many conversations with people that are much more closely connected to what's happening in Albany than we currently are at this point. So the recommendation is that school districts should make reductions that equal the amount of the following things. The amount of our original pandemic reduction, which is about $155,000, plus the loss of foundation aid, which was about $25,000. And then we have a unique situation in that we've lost that interest income of about $150,000. So the recommendation is that we make cuts right now that will total up to that amount so that we can balance our budget as though we're not getting the federal backfill on that pandemic reduction. So this will hopefully protect us in the event that those federal dollars don't come, or if we're cut an additional amount of money beyond that. So, I think we will probably get the backfill from the federal government. I think the challenge is if there are additional cuts made during those look back periods, we could land ourselves in a problem if we don't sort of prepare for that now. Right now, it's a pretty broadly assumed school of thought that the 21-22 school year will be even worse. And some of this is based on the fact that if you go back to the days of gap elimination adjustment, when New York State was in a similar fiscal situation, there was federal bailout for a short period of time, and then school districts were sort of on their own, and the state was on its own to come back from the deficit that we had back in beginning in the 2008 school year. So we're anticipating that we'll have to be prepared for additional cuts. So some of the things that we're currently considering, and we'll continue to talk more in depth about these items, we did have a local transportation efficiency study that we performed here, and there were some recommendations that we could take advantage of. We can take advantage of making some cuts that will impact class size. Every retirement that we realize we need to take a look at and make a determination before it's filled, whether or not we should fill it in light of this information. And there were some positions added since the gap elimination adjustment ended and that money was restored to districts, the aid was restored. We should really look at those positions simply because we did without them once, and it may be that we need to do without them again. So those are some of the areas that we'll continue to talk about making reductions. There's some other things that we need to keep in mind going forward that relate to our school budget. First and foremost, the voting for school district budgets will not take place until sometime after June 1st. And I word it like that because that's the last information that we've received. The governor has said it will be at least not until at least after June 1st. We don't have any other specific information about how this process will look. You all realize that there are timelines that we have to follow. We adopt a budget calendar every year, and there's certain dates by which notifications have to take place, budget hearings, and the like. And none of those things will be happening until a determination is made about voting, because the date that we vote determines the dates of all those other things. I anticipate the longer it takes for a decision to be made, the shorter window of time we will have to perform the notifications and the hearings and those things, because we'll run out of time if we're to pass a budget prior to the end of the fiscal year, June 30th. Candidates that are seeking board seats have been asked to suspend seeking any signatures for their petitions, and maybe for obvious reasons, you shouldn't be going out soliciting signatures when we're supposed to be social distancing. So that obviously puts a hold on the petitions being turned in for board seats. In addition, depending on what happens with general election activities, it may be that we wouldn't even have access to voting machines, even if we wanted to at the time of the vote. And that's something that not only do we have to consider, but I'm guessing the governor will have to consider. We have spoken with Onondaga County, and the availability of voting machines has a lot to do with whether or not general election and our election will happen on top of each other. And it'll also make a difference how many candidates there are for the Democratic primary. So at this point, I know that was a lot. If you have a question or wish to make a comment, board, you could wave a hand and then we can unmute in some sort of an orderly fashion. Yeah, get out of this.
Mike and who? Oh, Kelly.
All right, any questions? I can't see everybody, but.
And now your Spectrum News.
Okay,
Can I ask a quick question?
please.
So, in the worst case scenario, if we don't get that backfill of funding, what was the total of those numbers? What was the dollar amount that we have to?
The federal government was able to help with aid. So is that part of this? Is what we're talking about?
Yeah, today he was talking about cutting an additional 20% in school aid.
Right.
So it doesn't necessarily translate to 20% per district. I know over the weekend he threw out a number that he would have to cut school aid in half. So I think some of this really has to do with, I mean, today his words were really a cry to the federal government to help New York.
Right.
So I think a lot of it has to do with what the federal government is able to backfill, and then how the cuts are portioned out. So you're going to be hearing and reading over the coming days and weeks about school districts that are experiencing much deeper cuts even at this point than we are. And it has to do with the fact that some were given a lot more foundation aid, even districts that are pretty similar to us. And they're going to lose that in addition to their pandemic adjustment. So if a district that's our size was getting a $200,000 or $300,000 increase in foundation aid, that's the first thing that goes away. So imagine it's probably a great time for us to have not been receiving much in foundation aid.
So remember a couple meetings ago when we were all bemoaning a lack of foundation aid increase.
Right.
In hindsight, it seems to have been a blessing.
That's good.
I should have planned it, but.
Any other questions? Okay, and we'll talk more later. So, okay. Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah. Next presentation is the 2020 project update.
So as you know, school districts were exempted from some of the restrictions on capital projects, and we had to go through a process of determining the type of work and its necessity. So as you know, the project that we're doing right now is a heating replacement at DMS. Our heating system is in very bad shape, and if we if we had not started the work, because we have started it, we would not meet the state requirement for heating our buildings by the 15th of September. So it was deemed that our project was essential, and we started about 3 to 4 days earlier than we had planned. And that was because there aren't students here, so we were able to begin our abatement. So at this point, by the end of this week, a large portion, I'm going to say 75% of the abatement that was to be done during this entire project will have been completed. I'm trying many times to look for the silver lining in this very challenging situation, and that's probably one of the silver linings. Once the abatement crew finished with the district office and business office area where the ceilings had to be abated, they were able to move on to some classroom spaces where there was a lot pipe wrap, largely in pipe elbows in closets, but they were able to get in and do that abatement, as well as some abatement down in the basement in some office and classroom areas down there. What will remain that they won't be able to do quite yet is there is window caulk around all of the windows that will be replaced, and until the windows are pulled for replacement, they won't take the caulk. So that will happen this summer. In addition, there's univents in the gym and the auditorium. There's univents in a lot of places, but also heating units in the gym and auditorium, and that will have to wait until we start dismantling the heating system. That's a little bit premature because we are still keeping small portions of the buildings heated for those of us that are still needing to come to work every day. But we've made great progress on this particular project. So in addition, there was a door opening that had to be enlarged quite a bit so that the boilers could be removed. And that door opening was quite a challenge, cutting through a pretty massive, thick wall. And that has been completed so that when the boiler starts being dismantled, in fact, one of them will actually be starting, I think, next week, we'll be able to remove that boiler. We would not have been able to otherwise. There's quite a tiny door getting in and out of that room. They've also been able to start the electrical portion of the project so that the new heating system can be controlled and hooked up. There will be 3 new panels, and they've started installing the panels and even running conduit and some of the wire for both electrical and controls. We've received some good news that univents will be, they should all be on site by sometime in May, and you might wonder why that's good news. Well, there's concern with the shutdowns of so many companies and the percentage of employees working at a lot of these companies. We were concerned about lead times for some of the parts that we need for this project. And right now, we're not really experiencing any delay in the univents. We have been told that there will be a slight delay in windows, but we're still on track to have them in plenty of time. So we're pretty excited at least about that progress. So if there is a silver lining, right now it's happening in our project. So that's a little update on what's been happening.
Thank you, Mrs. Brandner. Item next on the agenda, number 4, recognition.
So I don't know if anybody has some shout outs, but I do have a few, and I think it starts with our students. I think our students have shown a lot of grace and resilience during a really challenging time. Maybe a special thanks to the class of 2020. I know that they're probably wondering why this is happening during their senior year. But again, every one of our students is working hard and really rising to the challenge, and they definitely deserve our care and respect. Second on the list is to our parents and families for the support that they're giving and the way that they're working hard in partnership with the teachers and with their children to survive schooling at home. And then, of course, all of our staff. It's strange to think that we've come to this, but we have teachers working really hard to teach from home and connect in new ways and learn new technology. We have cafeteria crew feeding kids and transportation staff delivering, and our cleaners and maintenance crews have scrubbed the buildings and are trying to take care of important maintenance items. And everybody, the counselors, the administrators, everybody's just pulling together to make this happen. And I just wanted to recognize all of the hard work of our entire community. I think we're faring pretty well, especially when I hear what some other communities are experiencing, and I feel incredibly grateful.
Anything else? Item 5 on the agenda, residents' comments. Public expression at Board of Education meetings is encouraged, and a specific portion of the agenda shall provide for this privilege. In most instances, the board shall reserve judgment regarding questions and concerns that are brought to the board's attention at a board meeting, as it is typically not prudent for the board to make instantaneous determinations. In addition, many issues that are brought to the board's attention do not require a formal determination by the board, but instead are most appropriately addressed by the superintendent or persons designated by the superintendent without further board action. This is in accordance with Board Policy 3220. At this time, if anyone has any comments that they would like to make, you can do so by typing your comment into the section of a YouTube Live labeled Say Something. That feature is located in the lower right corner of your screen. Once, if we receive any comments during the meeting, we'll do our best to relay those to the rest of the public.
So one comment did come through from district resident Mary Tone, and Mary asked if I could please repeat the total amount that we're so far trying to cut from the budget. That amount is about $325,000. That comes from adding $155,000 in pandemic reduction, the $25,000 in foundation aid being frozen, and $150,000 lost revenue from investments. And that's all that have come through right now.
And there'll be another section for resident comments later on the agenda. Next item 6, business. This will be a roll call for item 6.2, vote. Board members, please indicate present when I call your name. Michael McAuliffe, present. Patty Sager.
Patty, unmute. Okay. Patty is present. It's not unmuting, but she tried.
Mike Bristol.
Present.
Janine Lundergan.
Present.
Kelly Rossiter.
Present.
R.G. Venzel.
Present.
Thomas West.
Present.
Item 6.1, OCM, BOCE's Board of Education election. Resolved that the Marcellus Central School District casts its votes for the 3 vacancies. 1 vote for each vacancy in the annual election of members of the Board of Cooperative Educational Services as per the attached resolution. Board members received this in your board packets that came out. Do we have a motion?
Yes.
Patty?
And I'll second.
Kelly?
Janine.
Sorry. You were just saying, you said your name, so I can't designate who's saying what. Any discussion at this time? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Carried. Item 6.2, OCM BOCE's administrative budget approval. Whereas the Board of Cooperative Educational Services for the sole supervisory district of Onondaga, Portland, and Madison counties, the BOCES, duly presented its tentative 2020-2021 administrative budget of $8,640,392 at its 2020 annual meeting. And whereas the board desires to approve said tentative administrative budget, now therefore be it resolved as follows. Section 1, the BOCE's tentative administrative budget of $8,640,392 is hereby approved. And Section 2, this resolution shall take effect immediately. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Tom.
West, second.
Patty.
Any discussion?
Just so you know, this timeline was not changed. BOCES has to proceed now with the passing of their budget. That wasn't included in the governor's changes.
But so I do have a question. This budget, this 8.6 million, this was a pre-pandemic budget?
It was a pre-pandemic budget.
So we're looking at cutting our budget. BOCES doesn't have to cut their budget?
I believe that all BOCES are going back and re-examining. They just don't have the luxury of reworking before the vote because they had to stick with their original timeline. This is only the administrative portion of the budget as well. So it may be, if you'll notice, we're voting on a tentative administrative budget. So they'll have to go back and do some reworking as well. Like I said, they didn't have the luxury of backing off on their timelines. They have to proceed.
So we're approving a tentative budget? That seems weird.
I asked the question specifically and they're required to still proceed.
Okay.
Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item 6.3. Item 6.3, rescind the March 23rd, 2020 resolution approving propositions for the 2020 annual district meeting. Resolved that the Board of Education rescinds the March 23rd, 2020 resolution establishing the propositions to appear on the ballot at the 2020 annual district meeting and election. The resolution approved on March 23rd, 2020 contains dates and other information that are no longer applicable as a result of Executive Order 202.15 that was issued on April 9th, 2020. Additionally, the district will reduce the number of bus routes by 3 in September of 2020, thereby eliminating the need to purchase 2 buses. Do I have a motion?
Motion, Margie.
Margie, second.
Ellie, second.
Kelly Rossiter. Discussion. Folks understand what what we're rescinding?
Yes. Yes.
All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. Item 6.4, corrective action plan. Resolved that the Board of Education approves the corrective action plan for the 2018-19 internal audit. Do I have a motion?
Motion. Ellie, motion.
Kelly Rossiter. Second.
I'll second. It's Patty.
Patty? Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. Item 7, personnel. Resolved that the following personnel items be approved. You can see 7.1 through 7.3. Do I have a motion? I'm sorry, 7.4.
Tom.
7.1 through 7.4.
Still so moved, Tom.
Second.
Patty.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item 8, consent agenda. Resolved that the consent agenda consisting of the following items be approved. You can see items 8.1 through 8.5. May I have a motion?
Motion, Margie.
Kelly, motion.
Margie. Second?
Kelly, second.
Kelly? Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item 9, information items, COVID-19 update, implications for our schools.
So I just wanted to run through some of the updates so that they were sort of gathered in one spot, and for any of our listeners that are tuning in, I wanted to start just mentioning for people that are not aware yet, all state testing, has been canceled for the year. That started with the federal government backing off on the ESTA requirements, and then the governor following suit in executive order. And the late breaking part of that was that Regents exams were canceled. In addition, there's also implications for AP exams. If Jean is still on, I'd like her to just give a minute on AP exams. Jean, are you still there?
Yep, I'm here and ready.
Okay.
So AP exams, as you likely know from seeing Michelle and John's communications, have been shifted to online. So those exams will be abbreviated. Typically, they are normally 2 to 3 hours. They are now going to be 45 minutes. The exams are going to be from May 11th to the 22nd. The schedule can be found under our COVID-19 page. So it's one of the very top things. It says advanced placement testing schedule. There are makeup exams scheduled, but those are slated for students who may have technical difficulties on one of those May dates. So there is an opportunity for a student who, their internet goes out or whatever technical difficulties they have an opportunity for a makeup. We have been working, John and I have been meeting every other week with AP teachers in a virtual conferencing, just to get a sense of how things are going. All the teachers have communicated to students both the date and the time of the advanced placement exam. So every advanced placement student should be aware of when the exam is taking place. In addition, teachers have been attending webinars given by advanced placement so that they get a good sense of the shift in the exam. And they have been working with students to prepare them for the changes in the exam. Primarily, multiple choice is gone by the wayside. It is all going to be written. So our AP teachers have been working very hard to make sure our students are prepared for that shift. In addition, exams will be emailed to students on the date and time specified. So one of the things that we made sure on our end with our tech department is that the Marcellus, if students used a Marcellus email address to register for AP, we have whitelisted the address for the exam because we want to anticipate and make sure that no student's exam gets blocked. Today, AP did a test run, so they sent students just a sort of test, and students were supposed to click that they received the email to double, triple check that they have that communication wide open. So we're working through it. We're trying to anticipate any issues before that May 11th date. If by chance we're back at school, we will have the ability to get kids ready to test right at school.
Thanks, Jean. So staying with the theme of testing, you may have seen, especially if you're either a parent of a high school student or you're checking that COVID-19 page, John Durkee put out a letter that included the latest information on SATs and ACTs. So I just encourage, families that are looking for that information to refer to John's letter, either that you got in your mailbox or you could get at home or online, on our COVID-19 page. So obviously those are delayed and in some cases canceled. So as you know, school districts are required to continue instruction, and even without state testing, obviously, there's a set of standards that we're supposed to be preparing students to be successful with. I think our teachers are doing an amazing job, and our kids are working hard at reaching those standards. We continue to have to update state ed through the portal as to exactly how we're approaching. We are doing a lot electronically, but we did just do quite a large materials distribution last week on Friday. So our transportation folks came in and helped out. All of the teachers that wanted materials distributed came in and got those organized, and it went okay. I think it'll go even better in the event that we need to do it again. Right now, I'm sure everyone heard long before I could have sent anything out, the governor has extended schools being closed as part of the New York Pause initiative through May 15th. So the earliest we could return is May 18th. For those of you that are watching him daily on his press conferences, I think you probably are getting a picture that it's becoming less and less likely, but that's just the vibe I'm getting from what he's saying. And so I think we just need to continue to prepare to have this extend a little while longer. The principals and I continue to try to communicate maybe more than people want. I've been doing an all call about once a week, a letter every other week. Principals are doing the same thing, robocalls and letters, using Remind, Instagram, Facebook, and obviously everything we can gets posted to the COVID-19 page. We've also been doing our best to support staff through a variety of means, including virtual meetings, large group, small group, individual one-on-one. I've been calling about 10 people a day, just trying to check in and stay in touch. And people seem to be faring pretty well right now. We did cross a big hurdle in determining how fourth quarter would look in terms of assessing our students. And we started with the notion that we're teaching kids, not classes. And whatever we do, we're going to make this okay for our students. It's given us an opportunity to think differently about the types of assignments that we give and the way that we assess, and getting kids to think differently about digging in and maybe working a little bit harder on an assignment to improve it, with the focus being learning over the bell curve. That being said, we wanted to keep our grading system as it was, simply because changing everything can be daunting. So we want to put our focus on connecting differently with kids and teaching and assessing differently, while not playing too much with how we grade. We are feeding about 110 kids a week, and our cafeteria staff under Donna Rice's leadership is doing an outstanding job, and I know that our families are super appreciative, as many of them are really struggling with loss of employment and so on and so forth. I hope you got a chance to check out the great videos that our staff created, with saying hello and sending positive messages to the kids. I know I heard a lot of feedback that there were a lot of tears shed, mine being some of them. And I thank Katrina Ericole for helping to put those together, and Jean for collecting a lot of those video clips and pictures. So you might be wondering, who's working here right now. So let me just make sure you know that most of the administrative team is here. If not every day, they're working from home some days and coming in some days. Our custodial and maintenance crew are all here. Again, they were working on cleaning, and now they're transitioning to a lot of work orders that were sitting waiting to be done. And soon we will have to be out mowing and getting the grounds cleaned up so that we don't have to bale hay at some time this spring. Transportation is here as needed. They're helping obviously with food and materials distribution, and all the buses have been scrubbed. And obviously, what our cafeteria staff is doing. Secretaries are only here really as needed. We did create a phone line. All the calls to the district pretty much are routed through that line. And Jean monitors messages and follows up on all of those messages. So We're now turning our attention, quite honestly, to our seniors and really thinking about some ways that in the event that this is how the school year ends, that we're finding ways to make their ending as special as possible. That will start with the generosity of the Marcellus Academic Club supporting John Durkee wanting to purchase senior recognition yard signs. So they are currently being created, and John and I will be doing some special delivering as soon as they arrive. And he and I have started a shared document where we're dumping some ideas that we have for other ways that we can honor our seniors. And I certainly welcome any of you to join in with ideas into that conversation so that we can shape a good ending of the year in the event that as I said, the year ends with us not being together. So that's pretty much what's been happening. I've been reading some fairy tales and tall tales, and watch next week because I have a special guest reader who read John Henry, and I think you're going to love it. And Margie has a question.
I have a couple questions. One, I think that KCH did a virtual PTO meeting, and they talked about maybe doing a parent focus group. And I wondered if they started that, what's the results of it, and if the other buildings are doing that as well. And then I'm going to ask my other question too, so then I can mute. Also, can you tell us, what does it look like, since I don't have any kids in the school, I don't know, what does PE look like? What does home and careers, ag, tech, those kind of classes, what do those look like during this time?
So first, PTO did a virtual meeting. Unfortunately, I think I didn't get the invite until right before the meeting, and I missed it. I just didn't catch it, so I did not get a chance to get on with them. I can touch base with Sean and get a better sense of anything that they're doing in terms of pulling parents together.
I think Bob was focusing on trying to get a parent focus group to see how the kids are really doing. And because I feel like it's easy to say everybody's doing great, but I don't think the kids are going to tell the teachers they're not doing great. What's it really like at their house? And if they do need help, what can we do? And I just hate for them to quietly be overwhelmed. And I think that was what his focus was going to be. I just wondered if the other buildings have thought about that as well.
So you might be surprised to know that we are hearing a lot of feedback, and it isn't all that everybody's
good,
faring great. So I think that there's been a lot of reaching out, either teachers talking directly to parents, counselors talking directly to kids and parents, administrators talking directly to kids and parents. And I think they're sort of chipping away one by one. And our goal from the beginning has to take a very individualized approach, because the kids that are doing well, or struggling with normal things will eventually dig in and proceed. So the kids that are struggling, it's usually evident in the fact that they aren't checking in, they aren't completing work, and that spurs us to then get on the phone and make some contact. So not to say that it wouldn't be helpful to, have a focus group of families, but luckily I feel like we're really getting a lot of rich information, and we're supporting families, hopefully on an individual basis. Now, if there's a family that's hearing this saying, I'm struggling and no one has talked to me, please reach out. We will problem solve. A lot of times they're sending me messages to make sure that whatever answer they're giving is one that I'm okay with. And I feel like we're working really hard at that.
Great, thank you.
Your second question was, what do some of those outlier classes look like? They are more project-based, and I know specifically with ag and tech and facts, they're even experimenting with some choice. So, for example, I was looking at one of the tech classes today, and it was Eric Ledouce's class, it happened to be, and he had one assignment that everybody needed to complete, and it was using household things, design something, and then there were choice assignments so that kids had the ability to pick from a list and choose two to complete. And they're experimenting using Google Classroom. They're doing some video communication. They're doing some meetings, either whole class or small group. I know Liz has adopted a choice approach where she will create, 10, 12 activities, and they have to pick 7 that will, meet what her standards are. There was another class you mentioned too.
This is just also foreign to me. I just wanted to.
It's honestly, we've been talking a lot about being, more project based and let kids dig into something and go a little deeper with it and maybe struggle a little bit. And unfortunately, having this distance lends itself to us not micromanaging some of the things that we would micromanage. PE was your other question. So PE's doing a lot of posing challenges, wanting kids to get out and be active and encouraging that, very similar to what do you do with art? What do you do with music? One of the teachers sent me a video today of a little girl who had created a video of her. She had learned the cup song, the famous cup song, and she was doing the cup song. And, there's a lot of really fun things and exciting things happening. And there's some people struggling, and we're trying to lift everyone up.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for the superintendent? At this time, are there any other resident comments? Once again, I point you to the comment box on the YouTube live say something section of YouTube Live. Doesn't appear to be any other comments. Excuse me. Item next on the agenda enter executive session 11.1. Resolved that the meeting in public be adjourned and executive session be convened for the purpose of discussion of employment history of particular personnel, superintendent's evaluation, and the sale of real property. May I have a motion?
Patty, yes.
Patty, second.
Second, Janine.
Janine. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Time is 8:00.